Good morning, dear students. In this video lesson, we are going to have an analysis of the poem Penitence, written by the Scottish writer John Burnside. John Burnside was born on 19th March 1955 in Dunfermline, Scotland. He is one of the three poets, the others being Ted Hughes and Sean O'Brien, to have won both the T.S. Eliot Prize and the Forward Poetry Prize for the same book. So there are only three persons who have won both these prizes for the same book, and John Burnside is one among them. Burnside studied English and European thought and literature at Cambridge College of Arts and Technology. A former computer software engineer, he has been a freelance writer since 1996. He is a former writer in residence at the University of Dundee and is now professor in creative writing at St. Andrews University, where he teaches creative writing, literature and ecology and American poetry. Coming into the major works of John Burnside, his major poetry collections include The Hoop, published in 1988, Common Knowledge, published in 1991, Feast Days, published in 1992, and The Asylum Dance, published in 2000. Burnside is also the author of two collections of short stories, Burning Elvis and Something Like Happy. Burning Elvis was published in 2000 and Like Happy was published in 2013. His novels include The Dumb House, published in 1997, The Devil's Footprints, published in 2007, Glister, published in 2009, and A Summer of Drowning, published in 2011. His memoirs include A Lie About My Father, published in 2006, Waking Up in Toy Town, published in 2010, and I Put a Spell on You. He also writes an occasional nature column for The New Statesman. Burnside's work is inspired by his engagement with nature, environment, and deep ecology. So here we have the poem Penitence that is very much related to all these elements: engagement with nature, environment, and deep ecology. The poem Penitence is about the poet driving his car along a forest road and accidentally hitting on an animal, a deer. But the deer didn't die right away, but got injured on its hind legs. The poet wanted to help the poor animal, but there was something which prevented him from doing that. He was dreaded of touching the injured and bleeding animal. After staying there for a short span, he drove back home, ignoring the wounded deer. But even after reaching home, he was not able to drive away the thoughts of the injured animal from his mind. He started developing a strange feeling that the animal was none but himself. So let's have a look into the text of the poem. Penitence. The title Penitence means repentance or the feeling of sorrow or regret for doing something wrong. So the poet, he did something wrong, so he is having that repentance, the feeling of repentance. I was driving into the wind on a northern road, the redwoods swaying around me like a black ocean. The very first stanza of the poem itself is dense with beautiful poetic imagery. The poet compares himself to a sailor sailing through a vast ocean. I was driving into the wind, the poet says. There are some other images in this stanza which refer to sailing in an ocean, like on a northern road. The direction north has to do something with sailing. A mariner's compass always points to the north. He also compares the swaying redwood trees to a black ocean. On both sides of him there were redwood trees whose branches were swaying while he was driving. The forest itself is called a black ocean. I had drifted off I didn't see the deer till it bounced away, the back legs swinging outwards as I braked, and swerved into the tinder of the verge. His car accidentally hits on a deer which was crossing the road. The poet says that he had drifted off. We don't know whether it was his car or his mind which drifted off. But somehow he lost his control and hits a poor animal. The accident brought him back to his full consciousness. It is really a horrible feeling if your car or any vehicle that you drive hits on a person or an animal. Here he had hit an animal, a deer. We normally consider a deer as a beautiful and graceful animal. The animal was thrown away into a distance due to the force of hitting. It was on the hind legs of the animal that his car collided. The car swerved away to the roadside due to the accident. Soon as I stopped, the headlamps filled with moths, and something beyond the tree was tuning in, a hard attention boring through the flesh to stroke the bone. The accident had brought the poet back to his full consciousness from his reverie. Till then he was in a kind of reverie, but the accident brought him back to his full consciousness. He became conscious of everything around him. He noticed even the minute things like the tiny creatures, the moths and other insects flying towards the headlight of the vehicle. The poet also sensed the presence of something else in the forest. Other than the animal and the poet, there was something else in the woods which was observing him. He couldn't see it, but could sense it. From deep inside the woods, a primordial spirit was watching him. He felt it like the forest itself was turning alive and gazing at him. And something beyond the tree was tuning in, the poet says. Something very ancient or primordial or some kind of supernatural spirit was tuning in inside the forest. It was trying to have a communion with what happened on the road. A poor animal was hit by a car inside the forest, and a human being who actually do not belong to the forest was responsible for the crime. A hard attention boring through the flesh to stroke the bone, the poet says. The primordial spirit was trying to tune into the incident, tune into the mind of the poet, into the injured animal, into the engine of the car which the poet hadn't turned off yet. The tuning entered into the poet, boring through the flesh, and touched his bone. It touched the bone of the poet. It touched the spirit of the poet. There is a famous European philosophy which says spirit is a bone. In his 1807 book, The Phenomenology of Spirit, Hegel uses the phrase, the spirit is a bone, which sums up his thinking on how the spirit is expressed in the physical world. The spirit is not something ethereal or not something ideal, but a material consciousness. So the primordial consciousness entered into the poet and had a hit on his spirit, on his bone. I hope it is clear till this part. This is the first movement in the poem. There are three movements in this poem. The first movement is hitting the animal. The second, trying to save the animal and his failure in doing that. And third and the last movement, contemplation, a kind of contemplation and recollection. After the poet reaches home, he is having a kind of contemplation and recollection, and he is writing this poem. So that is the third movement. So these are the three movements in the poem. If you read through a conventional sonnet, you can find three movements in it: a movement, a counter movement, and a synthesis. This is how this poem also works: a thesis, an antithesis, and a synthesis. That shudder took so long to end. It took so long for the poet to recover from the shudder of being gazed by a formless spirit. That shudder took so long to end. I thought the animal had slipped beneath the wheels and lay there curing. That's a nightmare. You feel like having an animal, injured but alive, under your wheels, under your vehicle. At first the poet thought that the deer hit by his car was struggling for its life beneath his car. It was only the imagination of the poet. The animal was actually thrown away into a distance due to the force of the collision. It was injured but still alive. I left the engine running, stepped outside, away. At the edge of the light, a body shifted among the leaves, and I wanted to go to help to make it well. But every step I took pushed it away. The poet was not bold enough to switch off the engine of his car. He left the engine running. He felt himself in danger inside a jungle where he had nearly killed an animal which belonged to the jungle. He had also felt the presence of a primordial spirit watching him. Being a human, the poet felt himself an alien who forcefully intruded into the animal world and caused harm to one of its subjects. He had no idea what fate waited for him in the dark, in the deep, mysterious forest. It was his feeling of insecurity which made him leave the engine running, so that if it is needed, he can escape at any moment. Away, at the edge of the light, a body shifted among the leaves. Beyond the limits of the illumination of his car's headlights, the poet could see the injured animal trying to move in difficulty. And I wanted to go to help to make it well, but every step I took pushed it away. He wanted to help the animal, wanted to heal the animal, wanted to make it comfortable, but there was something which pulled him back. The poet tried to go near the deer, but the deer was afraid of the poet and moved away, staggering into the forest. Every step the poet took pushed the animal away. Oh no, that's not the truth, or all the truth. Now I admit my own fear held me back. Not fear of the dark or that presence bending the trees. But it was not the real truth. It was only half of a truth. The poet tries to make a confession here. Actually, he had not moved towards the deer. He was staying there in the very place without moving. He admits that he was held back by some kind of fear. He might be afraid of the wounded animal or the dark forest, or sometimes the primordial spirit whose presence he could feel. But in the coming lines, he negates the idea that he was afraid of the darkness of the forest or the primordial spirit. Not fear of the dark or that presence bending the trees. So he was not afraid of the darkness of the forest or the primordial spirit. He then tries to have an analysis of his feeling of fear. Not even fear exactly, but the dread of touching, of colliding with that pain. According to him, it was not fear actually, not even a kind of disgust, but a kind of dread that he had in touching the wounded, bleeding animal. He was responsible for the miserable condition of the animal. He never wanted to come in contact with or touch the pain of a poor animal, which was the result of his own misdeeds or his own crimes or his own actions. It was his careless driving that caused the pain of the animal. So he never wanted to come in contact with that pain. I stood there with the river of the wind for minutes. Then I walked back to the car and drove away. The poet commits two crimes here. First, he hits the deer, and the second, he runs away without providing proper care and attention to the injured animal. He simply retreats into his cardinal shell, that's his vehicle. Without taking responsibility of his crime, he escapes from the scene. I want to think that the deer survived, or if it died, it slipped into the blackness unawares. After that incident, whenever the poet thinks about the animal, the poet wishes that the deer survived, or if it died without suffering too much. It slipped into the blackness of the death without knowing or feeling too much pain. But now and then I drive out to the woods and park the car, the headlamps filled with moths, the woods tuning. I listen to the night and hear an echo fading through the trees. My own flesh in the body of the deer still resonant, remembered through the fender. Even now, whenever the poet drives through a forest during the time of the night and parks his car in the woods, the headlamp still on and filled with moths, the same strange primordial sensation fills his mind and thoughts. When he listens to the night, he can hear a faded echo coming towards him through the woods. He can't hear it clearly, but somehow it makes him feel that it was the poet himself who was in the place of the injured animal. This feeling is still resonant or throbbing in his mind. He gets this strange feeling whenever he looks at the fender of his car. A fender is the bumper of the car. It was that part of the car which came in contact with the deer. So, at the end of the poem, the poet feels himself to be the deer. A man turns into an animal. It is a wonderful example of zoomorphism. Zoomorphism is an exact opposite of anthropomorphism. In zoomorphism, animal attributes are imposed upon non-animal objects, humans, and events. For example, in Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis, we find the salesman Gregor Samsa turning into a gigantic insect. So the last part of the poem, the last two lines of the poem, is a good example for zoomorphism. So that's the end of this video lesson. Thank you.